The crash didn't sound like a mistake. Sounded like an execution. My $2,000 professional monitor hit the floor face down, the glass shattering with a wet crunch that echoed in the sudden silence. My brother, Caleb, stood over the wreckage, his hand still extended from the shove. The Wi-Fi lagged, he said, not even looking at me. I lost followers because of your upload. My mother, Cynthia, didn't gasp. She didn't scold him. She stepped over the shards of my livelihood without blinking and shoved a piece of paper into my chest. He needs the bandwidth for his stream, she said, her voice flat and final. Sign the lease for the basement or get out. Rent is $2,500. I stared at the broken glass, then at the pen in her hand. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up the pen. Before I tell you the legal trap I set with my signature, tell me in the comments, what is the most unreasonable thing a family member has ever demanded from you? I want to see if anyone can beat renting a windowless dungeon. Most people would have thrown the pen. Most people would have screamed until the windows rattled. But I didn't become a crisis manager for Fortune 500 companies by panicking when the building caught fire. My name is Hannah and I am 28 years old. For a living, I walk into corporate disasters, assess the damage, and execute a cleanup strategy that usually involves lawyers, NDAs, and very cold calculations. My mother didn't know she was negotiating with a professional. She just saw her daughter, the doormat. Sign it, Cynthia said, tapping a manicured nail against the paper. First and last month's rent due now. And don't think you're bringing that broken monitor downstairs. I don't want clutter in my house. Caleb snorted from the doorway, already bored with the violence he'd just committed. Don't worry, Mom. He'll sign. The ATM always dispenses cash if you kick it hard enough. I looked at the lease agreement. It was a standard template downloaded from the internet, printed on cheap paper. It explicitly listed the basement unit as the leased premises. It was the smoking gun I needed, and they were handing it to me on a silver platter. I uncapped the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name at the bottom with a flourish. I need a receipt, I said, my voice steady. And I'm paying by check. Cynthia rolled her eyes. Cash is faster, Hannah. Don't be difficult. Check, I repeated. For my records. Or I don't sign. She huffed, grabbing the checkbook I held out. I wrote the check for $5,000, first and last month. In the memo line, I wrote in thick, unmistakable block letters. Basement rent June and July. I watched her tear it out, her eyes lighting up as she saw the numbers. She didn't see a paper trail. She saw a down payment on the new car she'd been promising Caleb. As she tucked the check into her pocket, a familiar sick feeling washed over me, the ghost of the girl I used to be. For years I had accepted this. I had accepted the insults, the demands, the financial bleeding. There is a specific kind of psychological trap that happens when you grow up in a house like this. It's called the trap of normalized cruelty. When you are raised by people who treat love like a subscription service, you stop noticing the price hikes. You start to believe that paying for your existence is a privilege. You convince yourself that if you just pay enough bills, if you just fix enough problems, eventually they will look at you and see a person instead of a resource. You think the cruelty is just the overhead cost of having a family. I looked at Cynthia, smiling at her check, and Caleb, smirking at his victory. They thought I was still caught in that trap. They thought I was paying for their love one last time. They didn't realize I wasn't paying for affection anymore. I was paying for evidence. Good choice, Cynthia said, patting my cheek with a cold hand. Now get your things downstairs. Caleb has a stream in an hour. Hey, I said. I picked up my laptop. I stepped over the shattered glass of my monitor. I walked down the narrow, creaking stairs into the basement. It smelled of mold and damp concrete. There were no windows. There was no second exit. It was a fire trap, a code violation, and illegal in the state of New York. I set my laptop on a dusty box and sat down on the cold floor. I didn't unpack a single shirt. I didn't set up a bed. I checked my watch. It was 6 o'clock in the evening. I just had to wait for them to go to sleep. 2 o'clock in the morning. The house wasn't just quiet, it was dead. I stood in the center of the basement floor, exactly where I had been sitting for 8 hours. I hadn't opened a single box. I hadn't unpacked a toothbrush. This was the execution of the zero baggage protocol. In my line of work, when an asset becomes toxic, you don't try to salvage the inventory. You liquidate and leave. I picked up the silver, fireproof briefcase that had been sitting by my feet. Inside were the only things that actually mattered. My encrypted hard drives containing my client data, my passport, my birth certificate, and the lease for my new life. Everything else, the clothes in the closet, the books on the shelves, the furniture I had bought to make this house feel like a home, I left behind. They were just objects. They were the props of a daughter who didn't exist anymore. Leaving them wasn't a loss, it was a statement. I was telling them without saying a word that I didn't need their scraps. I didn't need their shelter. I didn't need anything they had to offer. I walked up the stairs, the wood groaning softly under my boots. I didn't look at the door to my old office, where Caleb's snoring drifted out alongside the hum of his gaming PC. I didn't look at my mother's room. I walked out the front door and didn't even lock it behind me. An Uber Black was waiting at the curb, its engine idling in a soft, purring whisper. I slid into the leather backseat, the cool air conditioning hitting my face like a splash of cold water. "Downtown," I said. The driver nodded. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the house. I looked forward at the city skyline glowing in the distance. 30 minutes later, I stood in the lobby of the Kensington, a corporate housing high-rise that catered to diplomats and executives who needed discretion and luxury on short notice. I tapped my digital key card against the sensor. The glass doors slid open with a silent, hydraulic hiss. No questions, no judgment, just seamless, expensive efficiency. My unit was on the 42nd floor. I walked in and the first thing that hit me was the silence. It was a thick, heavy silence that smelled like ozone and new carpet. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city grid sprawling below me, a million lights blinking in the dark. It felt like standing on the bridge of a starship. Felt like power. I set the briefcase on the glass dining table and opened my laptop. I needed to see it in black and white. I pulled up the spreadsheet I had been compiling for years, the family profit and loss. I scrolled through the columns, letting the numbers sear into my retinas. $48,000 a year. That was the burn rate. There was the mortgage payment I covered every time Cynthia forgot the due date. There were the $5,000 legal fees for Caleb's misunderstanding at a club last year. Assault charges that magically disappeared because I wrote a check. There were the grocery runs where Cynthia filled the cart with organic steaks and imported wine while I ate ramen in my office. For a decade I had told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself I was supporting my family. But looking at the cold, hard data glowing on the screen, the delusion finally shattered. I wasn't a daughter. I was a venture capitalist pouring angel investment into a failing startup called Cynthia & Son. And just like any smart investor looking at a company with zero growth, massive liabilities and incompetent management, I realized it was time to stop the bleeding. I closed the laptop. The ledger was closed. The funding round was over. Now it was time for the liquidation. 11:55 in the morning. The deadline. Back at the house, the atmosphere would be electric with entitlement. I didn't need a camera to see it, I knew the schedule. Caleb would be sitting in my old office, adjusting the ring light I paid for, checking his hair in the monitor I hadn't yet replaced. He was 5 minutes away from his big launch stream, the moment he was convinced would turn him into an overnight millionaire. Downstairs, Cynthia would be on the phone, probably with Aunt Patricia, bragging about her victory. I could hear her voice in my head, dripping with that smug, self-satisfied tone she used whenever she managed to manipulate someone into doing her bidding. "She's in the basement now," she'd be saying. "Paying rent too. I told you I'd handle it. You just have to be firm with her." They were celebrating the successful acquisition of a new revenue stream. They didn't realize the stream had already dried up. I sat at the glass dining table in my high-rise, my laptop open to the master administrative dashboard for the house. I had installed the entire smart home system myself 3 years ago. I set up the mesh network for the Wi-Fi. I linked the smart locks, the thermostat, the security cameras, and the lighting grid to a central hub. And crucially, I was the only admin. They were just guests with limited permissions. I watched the network activity spike. Caleb was uploading pre-roll footage. He was using bandwidth I paid for to launch a career built on my displacement. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like a surgeon cutting out a tumor. I moved my cursor to the Devices tab. I selected Select All. Then I hovered over the red button at the bottom of the screen, Revoke Access. I clicked. In my mind, I saw it happen in real time. The lights in the office would have snapped off instantly, plunging Caleb into grayscale gloom. The high-speed fiber connection would have severed, freezing his stream before he could say his first, "What's up, guys?" The smart thermostat would have gone blank. The electronic locks on the front and back doors would have engaged their deadbolts, sealing the house tight. I didn't need to imagine it for long. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. The first text was from Caleb, question marks. Then, "What did you do?" Then, "Turn it back on right now, I am live." I took a sip of my coffee. It was still hot. Cynthia called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "The power is out. Caleb is crying. He says you hacked us. Fix this immediately, Hannah." This isn't funny. I didn't hack anything. I just stopped providing a service that hadn't been paid for. In the corporate world, when a client stops paying their retainer and violates the terms of service, you don't negotiate. You terminate the contract. A voice note arrived from Caleb. I played it on low volume. It was just screaming. You jealous, petty bitch. You ruined my career. I had sponsors watching. I'm going to sue you. You hear me? I'll sue you for lost wages. I saved the voice note to a folder labeled Evidence Threats. Then came the public shaming. A notification from Facebook popped up. Cynthia had tagged me in a post. I am heartbroken to share that my own daughter Hannah has sabotaged our home. She hacked our system, cut our heat, and left her brother in the dark on the biggest day of his life. She abandoned us freezing and broke. I never thought I raised a snake in the grass. The comments were already rolling in from relatives, offering prayers and shock emojis. They saw a victim. I saw a confession. She just admitted publicly that she was dependent on me for basic utilities. She admitted I held the power. I didn't block her. I didn't delete the tag. I took a screenshot. I archived the post. Every lie they told, every threat they made, was just another brick in the fortress I was building against them. They wanted a war? Fine. I had the ammunition and I had the high ground. 1 week later. The silence was the best part. I worked, I slept, I drank wine on my balcony. The notifications had stopped because I had finally muted the entire extended family group chat. I was starting to believe I had gotten away with it. Then the buzzer rang. I walked to the intercom panel by the door. The small screen flickered to life, showing the lobby security feed. My blood turned to ice. Ma'am, the doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. There is a Mrs. Cynthia here. She says she's your mother and she has a key. I stared at the screen. Cynthia was standing at the front desk, arguing with the security guard. She was wearing her church clothes, a pastel cardigan and pearls, the costume she wore when she wanted to play the respectable matron. Beside her, looking bored and sullen, was Caleb. They had suitcases. My mind raced. How did she find me? Then I remembered the shared phone plan. The family bundle I had been paying for since college. I had canceled the payments, but I hadn't removed my number from the account before the carrier cut services. She must have used the Find My Family feature before the lines went dead. I pressed the talk button. Don't let them up. She says it's a family emergency, ma'am, the doorman said, sounding uncomfortable. She's making quite a scene. I watched on the screen as Cynthia gestured wildly, pointing at the elevators, then at her phone. She was crying now, the practiced, theatrical tears she used to get discounts at department stores. People in the lobby were staring. It was public humiliation weaponized. She was banking on my shame. She thought I would let her up just to stop the spectacle. I walked out to my balcony. I looked down 42 stories. They were ants from up here, but their toxicity felt radioactive. I told the doorman to warn her that if she didn't leave, I'd call the police for trespassing, and to tell her I no longer had a mother. I hung up and watched as security escorted them out, their suitcases dragging behind them. Thought it was over. The next morning an email arrived. Subject: Legal notice, intent to sue. A strip mall law firm claimed to represent my mother, accusing me of illegal abandonment and breach of a verbal lease for the basement, demanding $10,000 for my brother's lost revenue and emotional distress. The abandonment charge was nonsense, but the lease claim was the trap. Even a frivolous lawsuit could damage my reputation, and they knew it. They weren't after money, they were trying to make leaving too expensive. Then I opened a folder on my desktop labeled The Trap. Inside was a scanned check with basement rent written clearly on the memo line. They wanted court? Fine. At the meeting, my mother played gracious, sliding over a settlement demanding $10,000, an admission of fault, and my return to household duties. I picked up the pen and let them think I was breaking, then dropped it. I explained calmly that by suing over a basement lease, they had admitted to renting an illegal dwelling. No egress, no legal ceiling height. Under state law, that triggered rent clawback. Every dollar returned with interest. I showed the checks. The lawyer went pale. My mother panicked. They owed me $15,000, and that was before fines, insurance violations, and mortgage consequences. I gave them a choice: repay me immediately or I report everything. 3 weeks later, the wire transfer hit, funded by the sale of my brother's car and my mother's retirement. 6 months later, I sat in my high-rise, new monitors glowing, city lights below. My brother was working warehouse shifts. My mother had downsized. I deleted a file called Family Profit and Loss. The account was closed. I didn't lose a family. I escaped a parasite.